The water was scalding hot, but she didn't pull her hands away. Iris stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the same plate for the third time, her fingers red and raw. The house was silent except for the distant sound of the ocean crashing against the cliffs. She could hear her own breathing. Short. Shallow. Like she was afraid even that took up too much space. Behind her, a voice cut through the quiet. Margot's voice. Cold and sharp as broken glass. You missed a spot on the dining room floor, Iris. Again. Iris flinched. She didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll fix it right now. You always say that. But you never really fix anything, do you? The words landed like stones. Iris gripped the edge of the sink, her knuckles white. She didn't cry. She'd learned long ago that tears only made it worse. I'll do better, she said quietly. Margot didn't respond. The sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor faded into the distance, leaving Iris alone again. Always alone. She stared down at her hands. The skin was cracked, bleeding in places. She wondered, not for the first time, if this was all she would ever be. A shadow. A mistake. A girl no one saw. But she didn't know yet that everything was about to change. She didn't know that the floor she was scrubbing belonged to her. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell where you're watching from and what time it is where you're at. If you're new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. The fog hadn't lifted by morning. It clung to the Westfield estate like a secret no one wanted to speak aloud. The house stood at the edge of the cliffs, massive and cold, overlooking miles of dark ocean. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. The walls were lined with art worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. Iris Vale had lived in that house for 10 years. She had scrubbed those floors, polished those chandeliers, served meals at that long dining table where she was never allowed to sit. She woke before dawn every morning. She ate alone in the kitchen after everyone else had finished. She slept in a converted storage room near the basement stairs, a space so small she could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. She was 22 years old. And she had been a prisoner since she was 12. But she didn't call it that. She called it gratitude. Because Margot Westfield had told her over and over that she was lucky. Lucky to have a roof over her head. Lucky to have food to eat. Lucky that someone had cared enough to take her in after the accident. The accident. Iris still remembered that night. The screech of tires. The sound of metal twisting. The way her mother's hand had gone limp in hers before the paramedics pulled them apart. Lorelei Vale had died on impact. Iris had walked away with nothing but a scar on her shoulder and a grief so heavy she thought it would crush her. And then, at the funeral, Margot Westfield had appeared. She'd worn black Chanel and a veil that covered half her face. She'd placed a hand on young Iris's shoulder and spoken softly, like she was delivering a blessing. You'll always have a home with me, sweetheart. Always. Iris had believed her. For 10 years, she had believed her. Declan Ashford had never intended to notice her. He'd come to the Westfield estate for business. A potential partnership between his sustainable energy firm and Margot's investment portfolio. It was supposed to be simple. 2 days. Dinner, a contract review, polite conversation, and exit. He wasn't there to care. He rarely was. But then, during the first evening's cocktail hour, he saw her. She'd been setting down a tray of glasses in the corner of the sunroom, her movements careful, practiced, like someone who had learned that mistakes had consequences. Her hair was pulled back in a braid that looked like it had been done in 30 seconds. Her clothes were plain. Grey. Forgettable. But her face. Her face looked like it didn't belong to someone who should be invisible. Declan had seen enough boardrooms, enough galas, enough manufactured elegance to recognize something real when it appeared. And this girl, with her downcast eyes and the way she flinched when Margot's son Philip snapped his fingers at her for more ice, this girl was real in a way that unsettled him. He watched her pour the drinks. Watched the way she whispered, "Of course, sir," like an apology. watched her slip out of the room as if she hoped no one had noticed she existed. Declan noticed. He couldn't stop noticing. Later that evening, he stood alone in the library where Margot's assistant had left him to review contracts. The room was lined with leather-bound books that probably hadn't been opened in years. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Everything was designed to impress. But Declan couldn't focus. The girl's face stayed with him. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in that unnoticed, unpolished way. But because of her eyes. They had looked haunted. His phone buzzed. A text from his business partner, Sienna Hart. "How's the Westfield deal? Worth the trip?" He typed back slowly. "The deal's fine. But something here feels wrong." "Wrong how?" He hesitated. "Can't explain it yet. Just wrong." Sienna knew him well enough not to push. Declan didn't speak in feelings often. When he did, it meant something. He set his phone down and stared into the fire. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The ocean roared in the distance. Somewhere in this house, that girl was still working. Still invisible. Still haunted. And Declan couldn't shake the feeling that he was the only one who saw it. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of the guest suite, looking out at the cliffs and the dark sea beyond. The house was silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing. The kind of silence that felt heavy. Oppressive. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Soft. Hesitant. He opened his door a crack and saw her. The girl. Iris. Walking down the hallway with a basket of linens, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to take up less space in the world. "Excuse me," he said quietly. She froze. Turned. Her eyes went wide, startled, afraid. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you need something? I can bring." "No," Declan interrupted gently. "I don't need anything. I just wanted to ask your name." She blinked. "My name? Yes. I'm Iris." "Iris," he repeated. The name suited her. Delicate but resilient. "I'm Declan." She nodded quickly, nervously. "I know who you are, Mr. Ashford. Mrs. Westfield mentioned." "Just Declan," he said. She looked at him like he'd said something in a foreign language. There was a long pause. The kind that stretches out until it almost hurts. Then, because he couldn't stop himself, Declan asked, "Do you live here?" "Yes, sir." "I mean, Declan." She stumbled over his name like it felt wrong in her mouth. "I've lived here since I was 12. Are you family?" Her face changed. Something flickered there. Pain, maybe. Or shame. "No. Mrs. Westfield took me in after my mother died. I work for her." "Work," Declan repeated. The word tasted bitter. She was 22, maybe younger. She should have been in university, traveling, discovering who she was. Not folding linens in the dark. Iris shifted the basket in her arms. "I should go. I have to finish the 3rd floor before." "Before what?" Declan asked. She hesitated. "Before Mrs. Westfield wakes up. It's 2 in the morning." "I know." The exhaustion in her voice hit him harder than he expected. "Iris," he said carefully, "has anyone ever told you that you deserve more than this?" Her breath caught. For a moment, she just stared at him, eyes glistening. Then she whispered, "Good night, Mr. Ashford." And she was gone. Declan stood in the hallway for a long time after she left. The basket of linens she'd been carrying had left a faint scent of lavender in the air. He thought about the way her hands had trembled. The way her voice had cracked when she said goodnight. He thought about the way she looked at him. Like she wanted to believe him but didn't know how. He went back to his room, but he didn't sleep. The next morning, breakfast was served in the sunroom. Margot Westfield sat at the head of the table, poised and elegant in a cream-colored blouse that probably cost more than some people's rent. Her hair was swept back in a perfect chignon. Her smile was thin and calculated. Beside her sat her son, Philip. 30 years old, handsome in a lazy, entitled way. He scrolled through his phone while chewing toast, barely acknowledging anyone. On Margot's other side sat Vivian, Margot's younger sister. Quieter. Softer, but no less complicit. And then there was Iris. She moved along the edges of the room like a shadow, refilling coffee, clearing plates, never speaking unless spoken to. Declan watched her. Watched the way Margot's eyes tracked her every movement, sharp and cold. Watched the way Philip snapped his fingers without looking up when his cup was empty. "Iris," Margot said suddenly, her voice sharp. Iris froze. "Yes, you missed a spot." Iris's hand trembled as she picked up a cloth and wiped an already clean section of the table. "Honestly," Philip muttered. "It's like she's getting worse." Declan's jaw tightened. He set down his fork with deliberate calm. "She seems perfectly competent to me," he said. Margot's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. "You're very kind, Mr. Ashford. But you don't know her like we do." "No," Declan agreed. "I suppose I don't." But he wanted to. He wanted to know why a girl who moved with such care, who apologized for existing, was treated like she was less than human. He wanted to know what Margot Westfield was hiding. Because she was hiding something. He could feel it. After breakfast, Declan wandered the estate under the pretense of needing air. The grounds were massive. Manicured gardens stretched out in every direction, perfectly maintained but eerily empty. It felt less like a home and more like a museum. He found himself near the cliffs, where a small garden overlooked the sea. Stone benches lined a path that led to the edge. The wind was strong here, carrying the scent of salt and rain. And there, sitting on one of the benches, was Iris. She didn't notice him at first. She was staring out at the water, her expression distant, lost. "Mind if I join you?" Declan asked softly. She startled, then shook her head quickly. "Of course not. I mean, this is your space." "I shouldn't." "It's not my space," he interrupted, sitting beside her. "And you have every right to be here." She looked at him, confused, as if the concept of having rights was foreign. They sat in silence for a moment. The waves crashed below. The wind pulled at her hair. Then Declan said, "Do you ever think about leaving?" Her hands twisted in her lap. "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. I don't have money. I don't have skills. I don't—" Her voice cracked. "This is all I know." "That's what they want you to believe." She turned to him, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Declan met her gaze. "I mean that people like Margot Westfield build cages out of kindness. They make you think you owe them everything so you'll never ask for more." Iris's breath shook. "She saved me." "Did she?" Declan asked quietly. "Or did she trap you?" Tears welled in her eyes. She looked away quickly, ashamed. "I'm sorry," Declan said. "I didn't mean to." "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're right. I just never let myself think it." Declan's chest ached. He wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she wasn't alone. But he didn't. "Not yet. Iris," he said gently. "If you ever need help, anything, I want you to know you can reach me." She looked at him like he'd offered her the moon. "Why would you do that?" She whispered. "Because," Declan said, his voice steady and sure, "you deserve to be more than what they've made you." Her breath caught. She stared at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know enough." They sat there for a long time. The ocean roared below. The sky was grey and endless. And for the first time in 10 years, Iris didn't feel completely invisible. That night, Iris lay awake in her narrow bed. The room was cold. The single bulb overhead flickered. She stared at the cracked ceiling, Declan's words echoing in her mind. "You deserve to be more." No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered. She didn't know what to do with the feeling. She didn't know that across the hall, in the guest suite, Declan was lying awake too. Thinking about her. About the haunted look in her eyes. About the way Margot had looked at her like she was nothing. He couldn't just walk away from this. He wouldn't. The next morning, Declan prepared to leave. The contracts were signed. The deal was done. His bags were packed and waiting in the car. Margot walked him to the door, ever the gracious host. "It's been a pleasure," Mr. Ashford. I hope this is the beginning of a long partnership. I'm sure it will be, Declan said smoothly. But as he shook her hand, he felt something shift. A coldness. A calculation. Margot was hiding something. He could see it in the way her smile didn't reach her eyes. In the way she'd glanced at Iris during breakfast, like she was something to be managed. Declan climbed into his car and started the engine. But as he drove down the long gravel driveway, he looked in the rearview mirror. And there, standing in one of the upper windows, was Iris. She was watching him leave. Her hand pressed against the glass. Declan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. This wasn't over. 2 weeks passed. Declan tried to focus on work. Tried to forget. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. The trembling in her hands. The silence in her eyes. He'd seen enough of the world to recognize when someone was being crushed under the weight of a lie. And Iris was drowning in one. So he called Sienna. I need you to look into someone, he said. Who? A girl named Iris Vale. She's living with Margot Westfield. I want to know everything. Background, family, legal ties. Sienna was quiet for a moment. Declan, what's this about? Just do it, he said. Please. There was something in his voice that made her stop asking questions. All right. Give me a few days. 3 days later, Sienna called him back. Declan, she said slowly. You need to sit down. His heart hammered. What did you find? Iris Vale isn't who Margot says she is. What do you mean? Sienna took a breath. I mean her mother, Lorelei Vale, wasn't just some random woman who died in a car accident. She was Margot's business partner. They co-founded Westfield Shipping Enterprises together. And according to the original documents I found, Lorelei owned 60% of the company. Declan's blood went cold. And when she died, Margot took control. Said there was no will, no heir. She absorbed everything. But Iris. Iris is the heir, Sienna said. She's Lorelei Vale's daughter. She owns the majority share of a billion-dollar empire. And Margot has been hiding it from her for 10 years. Declan's hands shook. Send me everything you have, he said. Declan, are you sure about this? If you go back there, I'm going back tonight. He hung up, grabbed his keys, and drove. The estate looked different at night. Darker, more ominous. Declan didn't call ahead. Didn't ask permission. He walked through the front door like he owned it. Margot appeared at the top of the staircase, her face draining of color. Mr. Ashford, she said, her voice tight. This is unexpected. Where is she? Declan demanded. I don't know what. Where is Iris? Margot's smile faltered. You can't just. But Declan was already moving, ignoring her protests, ignoring Philip's shouts, searching the house until he found her. She was in the kitchen, hands submerged in scalding water, scrubbing dishes. Iris. She turned, eyes wide. Declan. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling a folder from his coat. I need you to look at something, he said. Her hands trembled as she took it. Inside was a photograph. It was old. Faded at the edges. It showed 2 women standing in front of a massive cargo ship, arms around each other, smiling. One of them was young. Dark-haired. Radiant. Iris gasped. That's my mother. Yes, Declan said quietly. And the other woman? Iris's voice broke. Margot. Declan nodded. They were business partners, Iris. Equal partners. Your mother owned 60% of Westfield Shipping Enterprises. And when she died, Margot told you that you had nothing. That you were lucky she took you in. Tears streamed down Iris's face. I don't understand. You're not the maid, Iris, Declan said, his voice gentle but firm. You never were. You're Lorelei Vale's daughter. You're the rightful owner of everything Margot has been living off of for the last 10 years. The folder slipped from her hands. Behind them, Margot appeared in the doorway. Her face was a mask of rage and fear. You have no right, she hissed. I have every right, Declan said, his voice like steel. And so does she. Iris looked between them, her world shattering and rebuilding all at once. Is it true? She whispered to Margot. Margot's silence was answer enough. Iris's legs buckled. Declan caught her, held her steady. You lied to me, Iris breathed. You made me believe I was nothing. You were a child, Margot snapped. What would you have done with that kind of power? That wasn't your choice to make, Declan said coldly. Iris pulled away from him, standing on her own, tears streaming but her voice growing stronger. I want to see the documents. All of them. I want to see what you took from me. Margot's face twisted. Philip appeared behind her, his voice cold. Mother, maybe we should end this now. Send her away before she embarrasses us again. Clara whispered, please. I haven't done anything wrong. Margot's hand rose. That's enough. The voice came from the doorway. It was Vivian, Margot's sister. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Enough lies, Margot. You're not protecting anyone. You're hiding something. Silence crashed through the room. Margot's composure shattered. You have no idea what you're saying. But her trembling hands told another story. Declan turned to Iris, his voice calm but unyielding. Pack your things. You're leaving with me tonight. She shook her head, terrified. I can't. They'll come after you. Let them, he said simply. I don't run from bullies. Something in her broke open. Not in pain, but in release. Vivian reached for her, eyes soft. Go, Iris. Don't look back. Iris took one last look at the house. At everything cruel and familiar. And she walked toward freedom. They drove for hours in silence. The city lights blurred past like ghosts. The hum of the engine was the only sound. Iris sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Finally, she spoke. You shouldn't have done that. They'll hate you for it. Declan glanced at her, his voice steady. I don't care if they hate me. I care if you keep living like a prisoner. Tears welled up. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. He pulled the car to the side of the road. The engine hummed low. His gaze held hers, steady, unguarded. Because I see the way you keep fighting to stay kind in a world that keeps trying to break you, he said quietly. And that is worth everything. She didn't speak. Couldn't. The world around her blurred, but his voice anchored her to something real. He turned back to the road. You'll stay at one of my family's guest houses. It's safe. No one will find you there. Iris's voice trembled. I don't want to cause you trouble. He smiled faintly. You already did. But it's the kind I don't mind having. Her laughter slipped out. Small. Fragile. Real. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Sienna flashed on the screen. Be careful. Verena isn't done. Declan's expression darkened. Iris turned, fear flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? He didn't look away from the road. Your aunt's hiding something, Iris. Something about your past. And I'm going to find out what it is. The car disappeared into the night. Two silhouettes swallowed by darkness. And by fate. The guest house sat on the edge of the city, tucked away behind tall iron gates and trees that made it feel like another world entirely. It was smaller than the Westfield estate, but it felt warmer. The walls were cream-colored. The furniture was simple but comfortable. Light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a garden Iris had never seen anyone tend but somehow always looked perfect. Declan had given her the master suite. She'd protested, but he wouldn't hear it. You've spent 10 years in a storage room, he'd said quietly. Let yourself have this. So she did. That first night, Iris stood in the middle of the bedroom, staring at the bed. It was massive. Soft white sheets. Pillows that looked like clouds. She sat on the edge of it, and for a moment, she just cried. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time in a decade, she felt like she could breathe. Morning came slowly. Iris woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She was free. The thought felt foreign. Terrifying. Beautiful. She got out of bed and walked to the window. Outside, the garden was bathed in golden light. Birds sang in the trees. Everything felt impossibly peaceful. There was a soft knock at the door. Iris. Declan's voice was gentle. I made breakfast. If you're hungry. She opened the door. He stood there in a simple grey sweater and jeans, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked less like a billionaire and more like someone she could trust. Thank you, she said quietly. They ate together in the kitchen. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit. It wasn't fancy, but it tasted like the best meal she'd ever had. Declan watched her carefully. You okay? She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. I think so. It's just strange. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I don't belong here. You do belong here, Declan said firmly. More than you know. She looked at him. Why are you being so kind to me? He set down his fork. Because kindness shouldn't be a question, Iris. It should be a given. Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking back tears. We have a meeting with my legal team this afternoon, Declan said gently. They're going to walk you through everything. The documents, the will, what your mother left you. It's going to be overwhelming. But I'll be there. Every step. Iris nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, he said. Just let yourself be free. The law office was sleek and modern, all glass and steel and quiet efficiency. Sienna Hart was waiting for them in the conference room. She was tall, sharp-eyed, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She smiled when Iris walked in, but it was the kind of smile that said she meant business. Iris, Sienna said, extending her hand. It's good to finally meet you. Declan's told me a lot. Iris shook her hand nervously. Thank you for helping me. Let's see if you still feel that way after we go through all this, Sienna said, gesturing to a stack of folders on the table. For the next 2 hours, Sienna walked Iris through everything. The company. The financials. The ownership documents. Lorelei Vale's will, filed but never executed, naming Iris as sole heir. Your mother was brilliant, Sienna said, sliding a document across the table. She built Westfield Shipping from the ground up. Margot came in later, as an investor. But your mother was the visionary. She owned 60%. Margot owned 40%. When your mother died, Margot claimed there was no will, no legal heir. She petitioned the court to absorb your mother's shares under a clause that stated unclaimed inheritance reverts to surviving partners. Iris stared at the numbers on the page. But I was the heir. You were 12, Sienna said. And Margot made sure you never knew. She kept you isolated, uneducated, dependent. Legally, what she did is called coercive control. And financially, it's fraud. Iris's hands shook. How much? Sienna hesitated. How much what? How much is the company worth? Sienna glanced at Declan, then back at Iris. $1.4 billion. The room spun. Iris gripped the edge of the table. I don't understand. If my mother had that kind of money, why did Margot treat me like you were nothing? Sienna finished. Because if you knew what you were worth, you'd take it back. And she couldn't let that happen. Iris felt like she was going to be sick. Declan reached over and placed his hand gently over hers. Breathe, he said quietly. Just breathe. She did. In and out. Slowly. What do I do now? She asked. Sienna leaned forward. We file a claim. We present the will, the ownership documents, and the evidence of Margot's fraudulent control. It's going to be a fight. Margot has lawyers, money, influence. But we have the truth. And that's stronger. Iris looked at Declan. He nodded. She took a breath. Then let's do it. The next few days were a blur. Meetings. Documents. Signatures. Iris felt like she was learning a new language. Corporation law. Fiduciary duty. Shareholder rights. But through it all, Declan was there. He never hovered, never took over. He just stood beside her, a steady presence when everything else felt unstable. One evening, after another long day of legal prep, they sat together on the back patio of the guest house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Iris held a glass of wine she hadn't touched. "I keep thinking about my mother," she said quietly. Declan looked at her. "What do you remember about her?" Iris smiled faintly. "She was strong. Fearless. She used to tell me that the world would try to make me small, but I should never let it. She said I was born to take up space." Her voice broke. "And then she died. And I forgot." Declan's voice was soft. "You didn't forget, Iris. You survived. There's a difference." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I wish she could see me now." "I think she can," Declan said. "And I think she's proud." Iris wiped her eyes. "Do you believe in that? An afterlife?" Declan was quiet for a moment. "I believe that love doesn't end just because someone's gone. I believe the people who shaped us stay with us, in the choices we make, in the strength we find." Iris nodded. "I want to make her proud. I want to be the person she believed I could be." "You already are," Declan said. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. He cared. Not just about justice, or doing the right thing. He cared about her. And the realization made her heart race. A week later, Sienna filed the claim. The legal documents were submitted to the court. Margot Westfield was officially notified that Iris Vale was contesting ownership of Westfield Shipping Enterprises. The response was swift. Margot's lawyers filed a counterclaim within 48 hours, arguing that Iris had no legal standing, that she had been adequately cared for, and that any claim to inheritance was void due to abandonment of responsibility. It was a lie. A blatant, calculated lie. But it was also a warning. Margot wasn't going to go down without a fight. That night, Declan's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was cold. Familiar. "Mr. Ashford. It's Margot Westfield." Declan's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want to speak with Iris." "She doesn't want to speak with you." Margot laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "You've poisoned her against me. Filled her head with lies." "I told her the truth," Declan said. "Something you should have done 10 years ago." There was a pause. Then Margot's voice turned venomous. "You have no idea what you've done, Mr. Ashford. That girl is unstable. Damaged. I saved her from a life of nothing, and this is how she repays me." "You didn't save her," Declan said, his voice low and dangerous. "You imprisoned her." Margot's tone shifted. Became calculating. "If you care about her at all, you'll drop this. Walk away. Let her live quietly. Because if this goes to court, I will destroy her. I will drag every painful moment of her childhood into the public eye. I will make sure the world sees her as the broken, helpless little girl she really is." Declan's hand tightened around the phone. "You're afraid," he said quietly, "because you know you're going to lose." Margot's silence was answer enough. "Stay away from her," Declan said. "Or I'll make sure every media outlet in the country knows exactly what kind of monster you are." He hung up. His hands were shaking. Iris appeared in the doorway. "Was that her?" Declan nodded. "What did she say?" Iris's voice was small, but there was steel underneath. Declan looked at her. "She threatened to drag you through the mud if we don't drop the case." Iris took a breath. "Then let her try." Declan's eyes widened slightly. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I've spent 10 years being afraid of her. I'm done." 3 weeks later, they received word that the case would go to mediation. A neutral third party would review the evidence and attempt to broker a settlement before it went to a full trial. Sienna prepared Iris meticulously. "They're going to try to intimidate you," she said. "They're going to bring up your mother's death, your childhood, anything they can use to make you seem incapable or unworthy. You need to stay calm. Stay focused. Don't let them rattle you." Iris nodded. "I can do that." Declan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. I know, she said softly. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room downtown. Margot arrived with an army of lawyers, all expensive suits and cold smiles. She looked immaculate, as always. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, a mask of calm control. But when her eyes met Iris's, something flickered. Fear, maybe, or rage. Iris sat across from her, Declan on one side, Sienna on the other. The mediator, a grey-haired woman named Dr. Ellison, reviewed the documents carefully. Then she looked at Margot. Mrs. Westfield, the evidence is clear. Lorelei Vales will explicitly names Iris Vale as her sole heir. The company shares, the assets, everything was meant to go to her daughter. Can you explain why this will was never executed? Margot's lawyer leaned forward. My client was unaware of the will's existence. Ms. Vale was a minor at the time of her mother's death, and Mrs. Westfield acted in good faith to provide care and stability. Dr. Ellison turned to Iris. Ms. Vale, were you ever made aware of your mother's will or her ownership in the company? No, Iris said, her voice steady. I was told my mother had nothing. That I had nothing. That I was lucky Margot took me in. And how were you treated in the Westfield household? Iris met Margot's eyes. I was treated like a servant. I wasn't allowed to go to school past 16. I slept in a storage room. I worked from dawn until late at night. I was told, repeatedly, that I owed everything to Margot and that without her, I would be nothing. The room was silent. Dr. Ellison looked at Margot. Do you dispute this? Margot's lawyer started to speak, but Margot held up a hand. Iris was always a difficult child, Margot said smoothly. Traumatized by her mother's death. I did everything I could to help her, but she was resistant to structure, to education. I gave her work to give her purpose. Iris's hands clenched under the table. Declan leaned forward. With all due respect, that's a lie. Mr. Ashford, Dr. Ellison said, please let Miss Vale speak for herself. Declan sat back, but his eyes never left Margot. Iris took a breath. I wasn't difficult, she said quietly. I was grieving. I was 12 years old, and I just lost my mother. And instead of helping me, you made me believe I was worthless. You told me I should be grateful. You made me afraid to ask for anything, to want anything. You took everything my mother built and you erased me from it. Her voice was shaking, but it was strong. Margot's composure cracked, just slightly. Dr. Ellison made a note. I've seen enough, she said. My recommendation is that this case proceed to trial, where a judge can make a final determination. However, I strongly encourage both parties to consider a settlement. Mrs. Westfield, if the court rules in Ms. Vale's favor, and given the evidence I've seen, I believe they will, you will lose far more than just the company shares. Margot's lawyer whispered something to her. She stood abruptly. We're done here, she said coldly. And she walked out. That night, Iris couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room of the guest house, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the fire Declan had built. He found her there past midnight. Can't sleep? He asked gently. She shook her head. I keep thinking about what she said. That I was difficult. That I was broken. Declan sat beside her. You're not broken, Iris. She looked at him, her eyes red. How do you know? Because broken things don't fight back, he said. And you've been fighting your whole life. You just didn't know it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Declan reached over and gently wiped them away. You're the strongest person I've ever met, he said quietly. She laughed, a small, fragile sound. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel it for it to be true. They sat in silence for a long time. The fire crackled. The house was quiet. Then Iris said, Why are you really doing this, Declan? He looked at her. What do you mean? You could have just given me the information and walked away. But you stayed. You've been with me every step of this. Why? Declan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Because when I first saw you, you looked like you were disappearing. And I couldn't stand the thought of the world losing someone like you. Her breath caught. Someone like me. He nodded. Someone kind. Someone real. Someone who's been through hell and still manages to care about other people. She stared at him, her heart pounding. Declan, she whispered. He looked at her, and the world seemed to stop. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned in. And he kissed her. It was soft. Gentle. Like he was afraid she might break. But Iris didn't break. She kissed him back. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. The next morning, everything felt different. Iris woke with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She found Declan in the kitchen, making coffee, and when he smiled at her, she felt her cheeks flush. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, unable to stop smiling. They didn't talk about the kiss. They didn't have to. It was there, between them, warm and certain. A week later, Sienna called. "We have a problem," she said. Declan put her on speaker. "What kind of problem?" "Margot's trying to settle. She's offering Iris $10 million to drop the case and sign an NDA. Iris's eyes widened. $10 million? It's a fraction of what you're owed, Sienna said. She's trying to buy your silence. Declan looked at Iris. It's your choice. Iris thought about it. About the money. About what it could mean. Then she thought about her mother. About the empire she'd built. About the truth. "No," she said. "I'm not taking it." Sienna smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." The trial date was set. 3 months away. In the meantime, Iris did something she'd never done before. She started learning about her mother. Sienna had compiled files. Old articles. Interviews. Photographs. Iris spent hours going through them. She learned that Lorelei Vale had started with nothing. That she'd worked her way up from the docks, learning the shipping business from the ground up. That she'd been fearless, brilliant, uncompromising. She learned that her mother had been everything Margot had told her she wasn't. And she learned something else. There was a storage unit. Registered under Lorelei's name. Sienna had found the records. "Do you want to see what's inside?" Sienna asked. Iris nodded. The storage unit was on the outskirts of the city, in a facility that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. Declan drove. Sienna came along. When they opened the unit, Iris gasped. Inside were boxes. Dozens of them. Carefully, Iris opened the first one. Inside were photographs. Letters. Personal items. She found a journal. Her mother's handwriting filled the pages. She sat on the floor of the storage unit and read. Her mother had written about her. About how much she loved her. About the future she'd dreamed of for her. There was one entry, dated a week before the accident. "Iris is everything I could have hoped for. Smart. Kind. Strong. I'm building this company for her. So she'll never have to depend on anyone. So she'll know her worth." Iris's hands shook. She kept reading. "If anything ever happens to me, I need to make sure she's protected. I've updated my will. Everything goes to her. Margot knows this. I trust her to take care of Iris until she's old enough to take over." Iris stopped. Her mother had trusted Margot. And Margot had betrayed her. When they got back to the guest house, Iris was quiet. Declan gave her space. But later that night, she found him on the patio. She sat beside him. "My mother trusted her," Iris said quietly. "She thought Margot would protect me." Declan nodded. "I know. How could she do that? How could she betray someone who trusted her?" Declan was quiet for a moment. "Because some people value power more than loyalty. More than love." Iris looked at him. "Have you ever been betrayed like that?" He hesitated. Then nodded. "By who?" "My father," Declan said quietly. "He built his empire on the backs of people he destroyed. I watched him ruin lives and call it business. When I refused to follow in his footsteps, he cut me off. Told me I was weak." Iris's heart ached. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Declan said. "It taught me what kind of man I didn't want to be." She reached over and took his hand. You're a good man, Declan. He looked at her. You make me want to be better. They sat there, hand in hand, under the stars. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in March. The courtroom was packed. Media, spectators, people who wanted to see the billionaire heiress take on the woman who'd raised her. Iris walked in with Declan on one side and Sienna on the other. Margot was already seated, surrounded by her legal team. When their eyes met, Margot smiled. It was a cold, calculated smile. But Iris didn't look away. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Carr, called the court to order. For the next 2 weeks, both sides presented their cases. Sienna was brilliant. She presented documents, testimonies, evidence of Margot's fraud. Margot's lawyers tried to discredit Iris. They painted her as ungrateful, unstable, manipulated by Declan. But Iris held her ground. When it was her turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head held high. Sienna asked her to describe her life in the Westfield household. Iris spoke clearly, calmly. She told them about the storage room, the isolation, the verbal abuse disguised as care. She told them about the day she saw the photograph, the moment she realized everything she'd been told was a lie. And she told them about her mother. My mother built an empire, Iris said, her voice strong. She did it so I would never have to depend on anyone. So I would know my worth. And Margot Westfield took that from me. She took my inheritance. She took my identity. She took 10 years of my life. Her voice broke, but she didn't stop. But she didn't take my mother's legacy. Because I'm still here. And I'm taking it back. The courtroom was silent. Margot's lawyer stood. Ms. Vale, isn't it true that you were provided for? That you had food, shelter, clothing? Yes, Iris said. Then how can you claim you were mistreated? Iris looked at Margot. Because survival isn't the same as living, she said quietly. And being given the basics doesn't erase the fact that I was lied to. Manipulated. Kept in the dark about who I really was. The lawyer had no response. On the final day of the trial, Justice Carr delivered her ruling. She looked at Margot. Mrs. Westfield, the evidence presented in this case is overwhelming. You knowingly withheld information from Ms. Vale regarding her mother's will and her rightful inheritance. You exploited a minor for financial gain. Your actions constitute fraud, coercive control, and breach of fiduciary duty. She turned to Iris. Ms. Vale, I am ruling in your favor. Effective immediately, you are recognized as the legal heir to Lorelei Vale's estate and the majority shareholder of Westfield Shipping Enterprises. Additionally, Mrs. Westfield is ordered to pay restitution for the years of earnings wrongfully withheld, as well as damages for emotional distress. The courtroom erupted. Iris felt Declan's hand squeeze hers. She'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. But Iris didn't run. She stood in front of the cameras, Declan beside her, and she spoke. My mother built something extraordinary, she said. And for 10 years, I didn't know it existed. But now I do. And I'm going to honor her legacy by continuing what she started. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been told they're not enough. She paused. If you've ever felt invisible, know this. You matter. Your voice matters. And no one has the right to take that from you. The cameras flashed. But Iris didn't flinch. 6 months later, Iris stood in the office that had once been her mother's. The walls were lined with photographs. Her mother, young and fierce, building an empire from nothing. And now, Iris was doing the same. She'd restructured the company, hired new leadership, implemented policies that protected workers, that valued people over profit. She'd also started a foundation in her mother's name. It provided support for young people aging out of foster care, for those who'd been exploited or forgotten. Declan walked in, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Thought you could use this, he said. She smiled. You know me too well. He sat beside her. How are you feeling? She looked around the office. The empire. The legacy. I feel like I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be, she said. Declan smiled. Your mother would be proud. Iris looked at him. So would you. He reached over and took her hand. I already am. That night, they stood together on the balcony of Iris's new apartment, overlooking the city. The lights stretched out like stars. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't come to the estate that night? Iris asked. Declan considered. Sometimes. But then I remember that I wouldn't have met you. And that's not a life I want to imagine. She leaned into him. I used to think I was invisible. That I didn't matter. And now? She smiled. Now I know I was always worth seeing. I just needed someone to remind me. Declan kissed her forehead. And you reminded me that doing the right thing is always worth it. They stood there, wrapped in each other, watching the city breathe below them. But across town, in a dimly lit office, Margot Westfield sat alone. She'd lost everything. The company. The money. The reputation. Her phone rang. She answered. It's done, the voice on the other end said. Margot's smile was cold. Good. Let's see how long her happiness lasts. 3 days later, Iris received a package. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was old. Faded. It showed her mother. And a man Iris had never seen before. On the back, in handwriting she didn't recognize, were 3 words. Ask about Alexander. Iris's blood ran cold. She showed Declan. Who's Alexander? She asked. Declan stared at the photograph. I don't know. But we're going to find out. The investigation led them to an old shipping clerk who'd worked with Lorelei. His name was Bernard. He was in his 70s now, living in a small apartment by the docks. When Iris showed him the photograph, his face went white. Where did you get this? He whispered. It was sent to me, Iris said. Who is he? Bernard sat down heavily. Alexander Kane. He was your mother's first business partner. Before Margot. What happened to him? Bernard looked at her with sad eyes. He disappeared. 25 years ago. Right after your mother took full control of the company. Iris's heart pounded. What are you saying? Bernard shook his head. I don't know for sure. But there were rumors. That Margot was involved. That she wanted him gone. Iris felt sick. Declan's jaw tightened. Do you have proof? Bernard hesitated. Then he pulled out an old ledger. I kept records. Things that didn't add up. Money moving in strange ways. Just before Alexander disappeared. He handed it to Declan. If you're going to dig into this, be careful. Margot Westfield is more dangerous than you know. Back at the apartment, Iris couldn't stop shaking. Declan, what if my mother didn't just build the company? What if she was involved in something darker? Declan held her. We don't know that. All we have are rumors and an old photograph. But what if it's true? Then we find out the truth, Declan said. All of it. No matter what. Iris nodded. But deep down, she was terrified. Because the truth had already cost her so much. What if it cost her even more? Over the next few weeks, Declan and Sienna quietly investigated. They found records of Alexander Kane. A brilliant businessman. A visionary. And then, nothing. He'd vanished without a trace. No death certificate. No travel records. Nothing. It was as if he'd been erased. Sienna found one more thing. A police report. Filed and then buried. Someone had reported Alexander missing. But the investigation had been closed within a week. Insufficient evidence. Who closed it? Iris asked. Sienna looked grim. A detective named Morrison. He retired 20 years ago. Lives upstate now. Iris and Declan drove to see him. Morrison was old, sick, living in a nursing home. But when Iris mentioned Alexander Kane, his eyes sharpened. I remember that case, he said quietly. It haunted me for years. What happened? Declan asked. Morrison sighed. I was told to drop it. From higher up. Someone with power. Someone with money. Who? He looked at Iris. I don't have proof. But the name that kept coming up was Westfield. Iris felt the world tilt. Margot. Morrison shook his head. Not Margot. Your mother. The air left the room. No, Iris whispered. That's not possible. Morrison's eyes were sad. I'm sorry. But the evidence pointed to her. And then it all disappeared. Someone made sure of it. Iris stood abruptly. You're lying. I wish I was, Morrison said. She walked out. Declan followed. Outside, Iris collapsed against the car, sobbing. Declan held her. It's not true, she said. It can't be. We don't know the whole story, Declan said gently. But what if she did something terrible? What if everything I've been fighting for is built on a lie? Declan pulled back, looking into her eyes. Then you decide what to do with it, he said. You're not your mother, Iris. You're you. And whatever she did or didn't do, it doesn't change who you are. She cried into his chest. That night, Iris went through her mother's journals again. She found an entry from 26 years ago. Alexander is gone. I did what I had to do. For the company. For Iris's future. I pray she never finds out. Iris's hands shook. Her mother had been involved. She didn't know how. Or why. But the truth was undeniable. She called Sienna. I need you to find out everything, Iris said. I don't care what it takes. I need to know what my mother did. Sienna hesitated. Are you sure? No, Iris said. But I have to know. 2 weeks later, Sienna came back with answers. Alexander Kane had been blackmailing Lorelei. He'd discovered financial irregularities. Threatened to expose her unless she gave him control of the company. Lorelei had refused. And then he'd disappeared. There was no proof Lorelei had killed him. But there was evidence she'd paid someone to make him go away. Iris felt numb. Declan sat beside her. What do you want to do? Iris looked at him. I want to tell the truth. Even if it destroys your mother's legacy. She nodded. Even then. Iris held a press conference. She stood in front of the cameras and told the world what she'd found. She didn't hide. Didn't sugarcoat. She told the truth. My mother built an empire, Iris said. But she also made terrible choices. She hurt people. And I can't change that. But I can choose to do better. She paused. I'm donating half of my inheritance to a fund for victims of corporate corruption and abuse. And I'm opening an independent investigation into my mother's business practices. Because the truth matters. Even when it's painful. The media erupted. But Iris stood tall. Months passed. The investigation uncovered more. Not just about Lorelei, but about the entire industry. Iris used her platform to push for change. For accountability. She became known not as the billionaire heiress, but as the woman who chose truth over comfort. And through it all, Declan was there. 1 year later, Iris stood at her mother's grave. She placed flowers on the stone. I don't know if you were a good person, Iris said quietly. But you were my mother. And I loved you. I still do. She paused. I'm not going to erase you. But I'm not going to hide what you did either. I'm going to build something better. Something honest. The wind rustled through the trees. Iris felt a strange kind of peace. That night, she and Declan sat together on the patio. Do you regret it? Declan asked. Telling the truth? Iris shook her head. No. It hurt. But it was the right thing to do. He smiled. You're extraordinary. You know that? She laughed softly. I'm just trying to be better than I was yesterday. You already are. She leaned into him. Thank you. For everything. You don't have to thank me. I know. But I want to. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Iris said, I love you. Declan looked at her, eyes soft. I love you too. And in that moment, everything felt right. The story of Iris Vale isn't just about reclaiming an inheritance. It's about reclaiming identity, worth, voice. It's about learning that your value isn't determined by the people who tried to diminish you. It's about choosing truth even when it costs you. It's about building something better from the ashes of what was broken. Iris started as a girl who believed she was nothing. And she became a woman who knew she was everything. Not because of money. Not because of power. But because she chose to see herself the way Declan first saw her. As someone worth fighting for. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you don't matter, remember this. You do. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And the moment you stop accepting the cage someone else built for you is the moment you start living. So tell me, what truth are you ready to reclaim? Drop it in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Tales of Desire with Mr. Walker, because every week, we're telling stories that don't just entertain. They transform. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are worth seeing. Always. Until next time.